Hello, I'm Llewellyn King. I'm the co-host, along with Deborah Woroff, my dear friend, of MECFS Alert. But I'm first primarily a journalist, and most of my journalistic career, despite time in England and Africa, has been spent in Washington. I am a creature of Washington simply because of the length of time that I've worked here. I started at the Washington Daily News, which no longer exists, way back in 1966, and then on to the Washington Post, and then to a publishing company of my own, and then to where I am today, where I make television and radio, and I write a syndicated column. I mention this because I think it gives me a certain credential to talk about what I think the community, the ME community, needs, and that is a presence in Washington. Not a huge lobby, not a gigantic thing, not a building, not dozens of people, but a presence. And a presence is usually one person. The right person could change the sad, terrible fortunes of this disease substantially in getting for it the recognition from government that is so overdue and that is going to be so necessary if we are going to do the research which will find relief, therapies, and ultimately a cure for this ghastly, dreadful, horrid, nasty business of ME. It struck me when I first became aware of it, through my friend Deborah Woroff, as something which confiscates lives, takes them away, robs people of the days of their lives, leaves them existing in a sort of drip-fed state, not dead and not quite alive, in one of the circles of hell, if you will. One sufferer said to me that she often thought that she was lying in her coffin. Another wrote to me, oh, so movingly, that she prayed at night that she would not wake up in the day. And so it goes. I now have an enormous archive of such sad, heart-rending letters, confessions, prayers. I believe the answer is massive research, not the paltry 6 million or 5 million, some arguments about how much money actually is spent by the government on research, but it is infinitesimal compared to almost anything else, including medical research, biomedical research, done by the government. We, and I include myself in the community in this sense, don't have any voice, any presence in Washington. A single person can make a difference. I'll try to explain how that works. In Washington, you are as important as the people you know. And you don't have to go with a bunch of money to Capitol Hill to persuade a congressperson to take an interest. You simply have to be around. A lot of the most important lobbying takes place in the most unlikely places. School games, after church. Simply the presence is important. But just as the presence is important, absence is felt in that nothing happens. There is no recognition. And even when there is an attempt, like a demonstration, a visit, congressional visits, it goes quickly. It fades away. Constant presence is needed in Washington. There are some of the most extraordinarily active, smart, capable people working on this disease as advocates. I think of people like Mary Dimmock, Rivka Solomon, Mary Schweitzer, two of them who have the disease, and Mary Dimmock, whose son has the disease. If we could focus some of their efforts permanently through an individual in Washington, I think things would begin to change. I think you would see budgets going up. Congress people would know what this disease was. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen. The other thing is the media. The most important media in this country is the media in Washington and New York. But unless you are in Washington, you're not likely to get into the media of their volition. You're not likely, for example, at a reception to meet a reporter who says, "Oh, that's very interesting. I happen to work for the Washington Post. They might be interested in it." We just don't have that. We are pleading from afar. We are asking occasionally, passionately, articulately, superbly, but from afar and intermittently. I think that this disease has reached a point, its suffering is so compelling that it is time all of those people engaged in it started to think of a presence in Washington. One person. I'm a big believer in the power of one. If you think of it, it takes one person to help you in life, in crisis, one person to make you happy in love, and one person to change fortunes. If you read Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, he talks about how one doctor changed the way childhood cancers were treated. We need that person. We need a profile person who will carry the message to Washington, this enormously critical, important message, speaking on behalf of some of the finest people suffering some of the most ghastly pain and denial by society that it is possible to conceive. I don't think anybody's doing a bad job. I don't think there are any villains. I'm not convinced that the National Institutes of Health is not enthusiastically on our side at some level, but they certainly aren't obviously, and they certainly aren't asking for the money in the budget requests that is needed. They don't have the pressure. Pressure in Washington comes from presence in Washington and from media in Washington. I hope you'll think about this. I hope somebody will come forward who would lead such a charge and who would go forth and independently raise money for such a presence. I think this disease should be supported not only by the government, but by the great foundations like Ford and Rockefeller. The need is enormous. The need is gigantic. The need is horrendous. The result is pathetic. It is time to go to Washington and make the case. Thank you very much.